What would happen to you if you were to lose your job tomorrow or get into an accident? If the main source of your income is a salary, how long could you survive without a paycheck? If you're like most people, probably not even a month. In this video, we'll look at the one thing every single person, including you, should have and make a priority to build. If you already know what I'm on about, still watch this video because I'm sure there's something new for you to learn. I feel like this is a great time to discuss this topic given the current economic situation that we're facing, so stick around. Hi guys, my name is Marius and welcome to Money Employed. If this is your first time here and would like to join our community of money employers and finance junkies, then make sure to subscribe. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like because it really helps out the channel with the YouTube algorithm. So right now we're going through some very tough times, not just from a healthcare point of view, but also from an economic perspective. The coronavirus pandemic has started pushing countries into lockdown, and as a result, supply chains are being disrupted and many businesses are closed and cannot operate. In countries like Italy and France, people actually need permission to move around, and some people have been fined for not following the rules. And because businesses are closing in an effort to slow down the spread of the virus, employees of these companies stop earning money. And just because they can't earn money doesn't mean that their bills and living costs suddenly vanish. They still need to pay for necessities like food, water, shelter, etc. Once they stop earning money, they can't do this anymore, and therefore they start dealing with financial stress. It's actually expected that the coronavirus will be responsible for more bankruptcies than deaths once everything is said and done. Now yes, the governments of some countries have stepped in with measures to help its citizens face these difficult financial times. Here in the UK, for example, the British government said it will pay 80% of the wages of millions of employees who are unable to attend work due to the coronavirus pandemic. This measure was taken to prevent workers from being laid off, which would cause even more financial difficulties, since so many of those affected would find it nearly impossible to make ends meet in the current situation. But why is that the case? Why can't so many people afford to survive for a month or more without earning money? Well, it's because of a huge financial mistake that most people make, and that is not having an emergency fund. Now, I'm guilty of making this mistake as well. For the most part of my adult life, I haven't had an emergency fund. I just believed I would always work and generate an income from a job and be okay. Now granted, I was saving money here and there, and I would typically have a decent amount of money saved up. But the problem was, those savings didn't even have a purpose. The savings would be there just because I would work so much that I wouldn't have time to spend. And that last word is the key word: spend. As soon as I would get a chance to spend on pointless things, the money was readily available to do so, and the chances of those savings being around for much longer would be almost zero. Luckily, I've grown to learn that as a responsible adult, I should always have, or at least work on building, an emergency fund. But what is this emergency fund and what is its purpose? Basically, it's a pot of money that you set aside to cover large and unexpected expenses. These can be things like medical expenses. For example, getting a wisdom tooth removed, which here in the UK can cost up to £2,500. You can also use this money to deal with car repairs or replacement, for which the average price is around £1,300. You might also need to repair or replace appliances or do some home repairs, which can cost on average £600. And in the worst case scenario, you will need this money to deal with unemployment. If your main and only source of income disappears, you need to be able to survive until you get back on your feet. And that cost really depends on your lifestyle and whatever fixed costs you already have. Now, of course, there are many more things that can be classed as unexpected expenses, but I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what an emergency fund should cover. By the way, I think it's very important to understand that buying a new Gucci bag is not an emergency, and neither is replacing your car because you're bored. But in its most simple form, an emergency fund should cover your living expenses for a good period of time. You should aim for a minimum of 3 months. However, ideally, your emergency fund should help you survive for at least 6 months. I think 3 months is too short, but it's better than nothing, and it can be enough in situations where you lose your job. Because, especially if you live in a first world country, you should be able to find another job quickly. So now that you understand what an emergency fund is, let's look at how you can start building one and see where it's best to keep it. Spoiler alert, it's not under your mattress. So the first thing you'll have to do is to calculate how much your living expenses cost you every month. By living expenses, I'm referring to your rent or your mortgage payments, food, bills, transport, insurance, and pretty much any other expense that is a necessity. Most of these will be fixed costs, but others like food, and I'm not referring to eating out, will probably vary each month. So just have a look at your bank statement and see how much you've spent on groceries over the last 3 months. That should give you a good idea of how much on average you spend on these. Once you have all the figures for your living expenses, add them all up, and that amount is your monthly living cost. You can even add an extra 5% of that amount as a buffer, just in case you become unemployed because of a health issue, which can turn into another expense. So let's say, for example, that amount is £800 or whatever your currency is. This means that in your emergency fund, you should have a minimum of £2,400 to cover your living expenses for at least 3 months. And like I mentioned earlier, it would be ideal to have 6 months worth of emergency savings, but you can get there in time. The thing is, the longer you know you can survive without an income, the less stressed you are about money in case it hits the fan. It's very important to be aware that emergencies do happen, and it's best to be prepared than to be taken by surprise. I know this from first-hand experience, and I'm sure you do too. And if you haven't had an emergency up until this point in your life, I'm happy for you, but don't think that it will never happen. It's very irresponsible to think that, especially if you have a family. Right, so now that you know the amount of money that you need to live on every month, let's look at how you can build your emergency fund. I think this is the perfect time to mention that this should be your top priority besides paying off high interest debt such as credit card debt. So the first and quickest way to start building your emergency fund is by simply cutting back on any unnecessary spending. You don't need to have a takeaway coffee every day at work. You can make it at home for a fraction of the cost and take it with you in a travel mug. The same goes for having lunch out. Now, I'm not suggesting that you completely eliminate these from your life. All I'm saying is that you should reserve them for when going out with friends or colleagues instead of making it a daily ritual. You can save anywhere between £20 to £50 per week just by doing this. The second way to help you add to your emergency fund is by reducing your living expenses. You might find out that you're overpaying on your bills and that you can get better prices by changing suppliers. Just by doing this, you can easily save a few £100s per year. This is actually something I did a while back with my phone contract. I had a contract with 3 and was paying £18 a month to have 30 gigs of data. However, my circumstances changed and I wasn't using anywhere near that amount of data anymore. So I downgraded to a contract with 12 gigs of data and now I pay only £13. Yes, I know, £5 is not spectacular or life-changing, but I can and have made multiple such changes, which all ended up going into my emergency fund and not overpaying on services. And by the way guys, it's really important to understand that even if you cut back and reduce your living expenses, you need to make sure you record how much you save from making these changes and actually save that amount of money. Otherwise, it's pointless. Now, before I go any further, I just want to make it clear that I'm aware that there are people out there who are already at the point where there's nothing more to cut back on or reduce. I completely get that. The previous points apply mainly to those who can optimize their spending in such a way that they can save a good chunk of money without much effort. And the last thing to do in order to grow your emergency savings is to increase your income. You can do this either by asking for a raise at your current job, or you can start a side hustle like driving for Uber or doing freelance work. If you don't have any emergency savings at all, finding a way to start making more money quickly is essential. But why is that the case? It's because this is a priority, and the quicker you build that emergency fund, the better. See the side hustle as something that you will need to do for a while so that you can be comfortable when times are hard. The problem with many people is that as soon as they start making more money, they unfortunately start spending more as well. This happens to the point where although they now make more money, they still struggle financially and can't save. And it's because they suffer from lifestyle inflation. So make sure you understand why you do this and stay disciplined. Okay, now let's look at where you should keep your emergency savings and how to make sure you will save consistently. Because I can almost guarantee you, if you don't have a system in place, you will eventually fall off the track. So first of all, you will need to open a high interest savings account with either your bank or another bank. Preferably, look for a savings account that offers an interest rate that's either the same or higher than the inflation rate in your country. That's just because it's best for your money to keep up with inflation and not lose value over time. In the UK right now, inflation is about 2% and it's forecasted to stay the same for the next 3 to 4 years. So ideally, you should keep your money in a savings account that pays an annual interest of 2% or more. I currently have a savings account with Lloyds which guarantees me a 2.5% interest rate for 12 months. And I can deposit up to £400 per month and withdraw as much as I want at any point. Having easy access to your money at any point is much more important than the interest rate that you are offered. Because if you do have an emergency, the last thing you want to struggle with is accessing your savings. Now, I know that there are other financial instruments in which you can keep your money if you can't find a savings account with a decent interest rate. Dave Hansen actually did a really great video on this recently, but it's mainly for those living in the US. I'll put a link to his video in the description below if you guys want to check it out. So once you have your savings account open, the next step is to start saving. And the hardest thing for most people is to stay disciplined about this, because we have so many things going on in our lives that we feel like we can't remember to save. But here's where technology comes to the rescue. Most, if not all, banks will allow you to create standing orders through their online platforms and mobile apps. So just create the standing order to leave your account on the day you get paid every time with the amount that you can save, and that's it. Your savings are now on autopilot and are building your emergency fund in the background without you having to even think about it. You can always amend the amount you send, but I only recommend you increase it instead of decrease it, because you might eventually make it a habit to keep decreasing it to the point where you just stop saving. It's just best to decide on an amount and then stick with it. And in case you start a side hustle, after any expenses that you might have for it, take what's left and send it straight to your savings account. I can guarantee you that once you see the balance in your savings account going up, you will feel great. You'll start becoming less stressed about money and feel really proud because of the clear progress you're making. At the end of the day, saving is just a habit, but it's an important one to have. Even if you can only save £20 a month, that's better than nothing. Just develop that habit and you will be surprised at the results. I truly believe that the reason most people fail to save money is because they don't give it a purpose. I've been there and done that. There was no point in me saving money if I was gonna go blow it on pointless things that I didn't need. However, when you give it a purpose, and an important one in this case, you'll be more likely not to touch the money unless it really is an emergency. The current situation in the world really showed how vulnerable we are and how many of us wouldn't be able to cover our expenses without our income. And it doesn't have to be a global economic situation to end up in that position. It can happen even if you hurt yourself and cannot attend work for a month or so. That's why having an emergency fund is so critical, and I highly recommend you go and start building one right now. Take action now, do not put it off. The sooner you have it, the better. And once you achieve your goal of 3 months, 6 months, or however long you want it to last you, you can then redirect those savings into long-term investments like an index fund that tracks the S&P 500, for example, which will help you save for retirement. But that's a subject for another video. So having that said, guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video and got a lot of value out of it. If you have, please make sure to hit the like button, because it lets me know that you guys enjoy the content that I put out. Also, if you want to show your support for the channel, subscribing and clicking the notification bell really does the trick with the YouTube algorithm. As always, comment your thoughts below and let me know if there's any particular subject that you would like me to cover. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.